Okay, I think we are live on the David Pakman Show YouTube channel. I have Tim Pool with me, who hopefully we are also live on your platform soon, Tim. How are things looking over there?
Not good. It's not
Not good.
working.
It's not okay. Well, we'll give Tim a second to get things rolling. I'll just welcome everybody on my YouTube channel. We're going to be talking about a whole bunch of different stuff, including platforming, censorship, free speech. It's going to be quite a list. And if people aren't familiar with Tim, maybe we'll get to know him in a little bit. Tim is working on getting us going on his channel as well.
I'm just gonna have to do a
And
new stream, I guess.
all right, you can go ahead
Sorry,
and
yeah.
no problem. So for people, I mean, it kind of works out okay because people are. We'll give people time to get in here. We have a whole bunch of new clips scheduled to go live on the David Pakman Show YouTube channel for the rest of the day. I think there's going to be some good stuff in there that people will like. Many people liking the David Pakman off of social media topic, and I followed up on that on today's program. There's a clip that I think goes live at maybe 10:30 p.m. Eastern related to that. And if there's anything that's like ever unified my audience across left and right, it's me saying I might get off of social media. Left and right, absolutely loving that. The typing you hear is Tim Pool, who
Sorry, yeah.
is no problem, Tim. He is getting himself all good to go so that we can have a conversation on both of our channels, and setting up a new stream and all of that stuff. How would you rate it? How is it going, Tim? Like between 1 and 10?
It's going really bad. Um, I have no idea why it's giving me the business. Yeah,
Jeez.
it's not. I don't know if it's working.
And are you
I
trying to
think it's
stream from
working.
OBS?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. And so you've got your YouTube stream address from your Go Live dashboard and the stream key.
Yeah, and it's just. I think we're live.
Oh,
We
all
are
right.
live. It's working.
Okay.
I have to post the link.
Okay. No problem. So we'll
Cool.
give Tim a second to do that.
Well, yeah. Say what you want to say about whatever while I.
Well, I was going to go into an anti-Semitic screed, but I want to make sure you hear all of it. So I'm just gonna wait a second. Now, okay, so we're going to be having a conversation with Tim Pool. Tim Pool is known to some people in my audience and not known to some people in my audience. So maybe we could potentially start there. So I guess, Tim, to begin with, like what are we doing? How did this all happen, and why are we even talking today? It's because we had sort of like a Twitter. I don't even know if it's a disagreement, but we had a conversation on Twitter that led to this conversation.
Yeah, so I posted a tweet where I said, I can't really remember, but something about why should social media companies be exempt from civil rights law?
Right.
And then you responded with, I think this is a good faith attempt, but a bad take.
Right.
I responded, I don't know exactly what the thread was, but it was essentially, for me, the issue comes about, for one, with the constant talk of censorship on social media and the idea that these platforms have become so powerful they're actually influencing elections.
Yes.
So we shouldn't let private companies just do whatever they want. But specifically, there was a story from Motherboard where the lead of the story kind of buried an important issue. It said that Twitter won't use an algorithm to remove white nationalists because it might get Republicans.
Right.
In the story, it said Twitter believes, not only do they believe it's acceptable, but that the public finds it acceptable that innocent Muslims are removed from Twitter because they're trying to get ISIS. I personally find that unacceptable.
But they find it unacceptable that Republicans would be sort of caught up in a similar application of a policy to remove white nationalists. In other words, it's not an equal application, you're saying.
Yeah, so we ended up seeing this wave of stories where they said, incorrectly, Twitter won't ban white nationalists. Well, the story was specifically that because white nationalists use Trump rhetoric, if they implemented an algorithm, it would sweep up innocent Republicans. And Twitter said it was one Twitter employee, I might add, because Twitter's denying this. But the employee said the public wouldn't accept that, so we're not going to do it. And then,
okay, so that's their opinion, so to speak.
It was one employee, and I think we should be careful about stuff like that. But if this one employee is to be taken at face value, he straight up said that Arab language broadcasters and Muslims will get banned arbitrarily by algorithm. I don't think that's okay.
Arbitrarily, maybe incorrectly. In other words, there will be false positives, I guess, is maybe a more accurate way to say it.
Sure. Right. Simply because some people in ISIS use similar language to regular Muslims, it's going to negatively impact everybody. And so I guess the point I was trying to make is under the broad interpretation of Section 230 and using additionally a First Amendment argument, social media companies, online services are exempt from civil rights law. I mean that it sounds as bad as it is. It's mind blowing to me.
Okay, so let's
yeah.
work up to that if we can. So and even, I mean, maybe just to set the stage, and then in a second we'll get to what parts we do agree on, and then maybe that'll help us figure out where we might disagree. If people don't know you, like, what are your politics? How should people be sort of thinking about your politics in the context of this conversation?
I guess no one believes me, but that's okay. I think I've always been kind of a social liberal. I was a fervent Bernie supporter in 2016, but I have definitely moved a little way for Bernie for several reasons. Right now, I am currently supporting and have donated to Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang, but I am very, very anti-democratic establishment. And admittedly, I am not, like, when it comes to, I think for your audience, I've made maybe like 2 to 5% of my videos directly at Trump and about what Trump has done.
Okay.
I do regularly say bad things about Trump, but I think my focus is very much on what I see as the Democrats are moving in a dangerous direction. Not that I think the corporate centrist types like Biden and Hillary are any good,
right?
But I'm seeing what I feel culturally is a dangerous progression on the left towards regressive, authoritarian. There's the tribal word, regressive. And so I'm very much focused on how the media manipulates how, but you know, I don't want to get too much into that, I suppose. My politics are rather center left in a lot of ways. And there's 2 reasons why I'm actively supporting Tulsi and Andrew Yang.
Okay.
For one, wow, Yang, I gotta admit, when I first started watching him, I was kind of just like, whatever, you know, I don't like UBI. But the dude really has thought out a lot. And I agree with so much of what he's doing. You just go to his website and he's got a ridiculous amount of policy ideas. And the way he's framing UBI actually as a VAT tax dividend through these massive corporations, that spoke to me a lot, because one of the biggest issues I have is these tech monopolies. It is literally what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
How they're taking over the commons.
Well, let's not jump the gun on that. But so, okay, if my observation is that you're right. It seems about 2 to 5% of your channel is criticizing Trump. I just took a glance at it before we went live. 85% of it seems to be criticizing not just Democrats, but the left. So I want to hear you defend your position that you are center left, because like if somebody looks at my channel, it's obvious that I'm on the left and I'm a progressive. If you look at just my last 10 videos, my last 20 videos, my last 100 videos, whatever. When I pulled up your channel, I see Republicans push laws to end censorship, pro-Republican story. Facebook's purge of the right has begun.
Is that pro-Republican?
I think it is. I mean, well, so let me get to that in a second. Let me explain. Yeah. So I'll so conservative news added to blacklist. Conservatives are the victims. Leftist activists, not establishment Dems, but leftist activists force MasterCard to vote on banning the far right. The far right is the victim. Antifa planned armed disruption of U.S. border. It's the left that's causing violent chaos at the border. Censorship backfires on far left. Of course, far left is not establishment Dems. Another hate crime hoax exposed. That's, I mean, the hate crime, that's less politically, overtly political. Mueller report provides proves media is a fake news trash fire. Mostly a story being parroted by the right, although there are enclaves on the left that are saying that. So my view, Tim, is, and you know we've known each other for years, and this is not, this is just my assessment of what's on your channel. That about 85% of your content is going after the left. And I totally get criticizing the left from the left. Like, I do that as well. But the overall selection is selection of stories that to me seems as painting the right in a good light or as the victims, and choosing to go after relatively insignificant enclaves of the left. Tell me I'm wrong.
Well, no, the way you see it is the way a lot of people see it. And I think you have your opinion, your view. I'll psychoanalyze myself for a second. And I think for me, I was kind of, growing up kind of ostracized by a lot of the establishment and main left, but more specifically, again, to psychoanalyze myself, I've gone through a period where all of the attacks I receive and everything that tries to ruin my life is coming from this one group of left-wing individuals for a specific purpose. And that's naturally going to result in certain behaviors and certain focuses. So let's actually, I don't want to make that seem like a cop-out. you know, I've been physically attacked by the left, not the right. People are right now taking a quote from Vox.com to make it seem like I'm an anti-Semite so they can get me removed from my bank account and stuff. That's not coming from conservatives. It never has.
That's
Even
fair.
when,
That's totally fair. But I guess what's
but
important to me.
I will go through these videos though. I will. So
Yeah.
forgive me.
And I actually don't need you to do an accounting of each video. For me, it's more if I look at your channel and 85% is criticisms that are what I would consider relatively niche in terms of their existence on the left. It doesn't strike me as someone whose priorities are center left to say,
Well,
here's
no,
what
but-
I think 85% of my channel should be.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
Tulsi Gabbard denounced identity politics outright with Michael Tracy. She said straight up, it's divisive, it's bad for us.
Okay.
Identitarianism is one of the biggest things that I have a problem with due to my family history being, I know it's kind of a meme, but mixed. And this comes from when we look at affirmative
But Tim,
action.
isn't that identity politics? You're saying your view on this is informed. You're against identity politics as informed by your identity.
Yeah, it is what it is. I'll put it this way. I am not permitted the left nor the right allow me an identity. So what that does is it kind of ostracizes me. And what I find recluse, not recluse, but what I find safe harbor, I guess, is the fact that the U.S. actually had protections against discrimination based on race in these things. So for me, someone who's experienced it from both directions, I'm apprehensive towards either direction. When I have the left telling me I'm a white male and the right telling me I'm a mudblood, like I'm not going to be happy.
Fine,
with either
but Tim,
group.
so I have the left saying I'm not Jewish, I'm white, and I have white privilege, and I have the right saying I'm not white, I'm Jewish, and Jews are a race that is really bad, and we should be really. So the fact that
I hear you.
but that doesn't make me all of a sudden say I'm going to do 85% of my videos and criticize the left. You know what I mean?
No, I think it's what you personally find important, right? You know, if you watch any of my videos, like, so here's the thing.
Yeah.
Subject matter doesn't dictate politics simply because you've got, you know, who's, and again, it's my opinion, but
Sure.
when I say who's trying to remove people from the internet, it's not like Nancy Pelosi. It's a particular sect of a group of progressive, more far left individuals who's trying to get people removed from their banks, who's trying to get people banned, who's arguing in favor of regulation that restricts speech. It's not conservatives and it's not moderate Democrats.
Okay, but a lot
And
of
so
your
that
stories don't
freaks me
relate
out.
specifically to that issue. But let's not belabor it. I do find it sort of interesting,
Yeah.
though, that in the same sentence that you said you're against identity politics and that's why you like Tulsi, you made an identity politics argument based on your identity, which strikes me as a contradiction of sorts. That was weird to me.
There's the support of politics based on someone's identity and the support of opposition to that, right? I don't. And let me make clear, some identity politics are absolutely a good thing. It's identitarianism that's a bad thing. So
Okay.
Maybe that's. So I tell people this: authority is a good thing. Like when a doctor tells you, "Hey, there's someone injured. Put your hand on the wound." That's true authority. You'll just do it. You know they're right.
Okay.
But authoritarianism is a really, really bad thing. So telling someone in our society you cannot factor in race in terms of public accommodation, that's a violation of civil rights. I like that. When you say we're absolutely going to factor in race, I don't like that. So it's nuanced, I guess, right?
And does anyone who's saying that we have to factor in race when it's not a relevant factor?
The ACLU, when they supported affirmative action at Harvard, which lumps all Asians, Indian, Chinese, Laotians into one category, and I find that offensive as an Asian person. And so when I come out and say,
but Tim, that's an identity to say you should be able to argue whether it's offensive or not offensive, right or not right, without saying because you are part Asian, you find like that's identity politics, which you claim to be against.
I agree. And I think the clarification then, I think what we're discovering here is that it's not so much the core idea of identity politics, it's the application of in ways that either is reductive or authoritarian. So let me frame it this way. The civil rights movement, paramount, 100% important. It's the only reason my family was able to live in this country without threat of law because miscegenation laws made it illegal for my family to live together. It was identity politics that ended that. But that was the end of identitarianism, where they actually said this for this race, this for that race. And so we implemented laws that said you can't do X based on these characteristics. I like that. It's not perfect. But now we're seeing, particularly, I think it's Harvard, where there's this really common idea of all race is one thing. And that's just not true, right? So
But that's totally separate from identity politics.
So I think we're clarifying the issue in that case then,
Okay.
right? So if I think to reduce it to simple identity politics is more of a tribal signifier. Like if I say to certain people identity politics, they nod and they understand. And I think what you're bringing up, it's actually really important because we're seeing how language kind of divides us more.
Well,
'Cause
but I didn't bring it up. All I'm bringing up is that twice now you're in the context of saying you're against identity politics, you brought up your identity as the basis for why you feel the way you do, which seems to me like identity politics.
And so I guess to clarify, I think it's wrong to judge people based on the color of their skin, and we should judge them based on the content of their character.
Okay.
So to me, to my interpretation of identitarianism, based on its root definition as identity-based government, would be the government saying this for this race, that for that race. That to me is wrong.
Okay.
So when you see like certain groups advocating that we should factor in race for college admissions, I think that's wrong. I think we should judge individuals based on who they are, and one of the reasons for this is that it doesn't matter what your skin color is. It doesn't matter if you're gay, straight, trans, or whatever. You can be rich or poor. And if we start acting like the true signifier of someone's capabilities or someone's privilege is what color their skin is, that's when things are devolving into overt racism, because you're going to have particularly wealthy, say Indians, millionaire, high caste individuals who come to America and claim that the middle class working family who's white has more power than they do. And this argument starts getting, it's dangerous.
Yeah, well,
we want to take care of the poor.
We can find counter examples where the more prominent historical narratives aren't true, but I think we need something stronger to make a sort of broader indictment of what policy might be. But because we're kind of now getting into what we were originally going to talk about, so let's explore part one of censorship and discrimination, et cetera. There are identity elements that are protected classes under the law. Some of them are protected under the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So I believe, going from memory, race is protected under the 64 Civil Rights Act. I believe nationality comes from the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and some others. There are others, like, for example, age. Age is a protected class on the basis of the Employment Discrimination Act of 1967. The exact origin of each category doesn't matter so much as the point that this is what the law currently says. Is that something you are in agreement with, or do you think those laws are problematic?
Civil rights protections?
Yes, on the basis of the categories I listed.
I don't want to be reductive, but I would say at first glance, absolutely, civil rights, expanding them even. I think, like the Equality Act, for instance, important, but I often bring up the caveats that we have to be careful about, because we're trying to protect everyone's rights, and we have to make sure we don't overlap in certain areas, like overt Christians who believe that gay people shouldn't be married, claiming that's their right when it doesn't interfere with their lives. It's so that's not an argument.
No, it's not. But what I mean is, you believe that it should be that employers and businesses should not be able to discriminate against employees and customers on the basis of the religion, for example, or
absolutely.
their status as veterans or race or whatever.
Well, status as veterans, I don't know enough about.
Well, I was going to get into that. So I was going to ask you, are there any categories of protected class that you actually don't think should have protected status?
I don't know.
Okay. I mean, I have two that I'll bring up. There's two that for me are question marks, and I'll tell you why. Yeah. One is religion, and I go back and forth on it for the following reason. On the one hand, we have a country where freedom of and freedom from religion is a very important characteristic of how the country was established. So to say religious belief or lack of religious belief should not be protected, it seems problematic to me in some ways. On the other hand, religion is self-professed. Now, you can say if you're born into a Catholic family, to choose not to be Catholic anymore is different than to be born agnostic and to choose to continue being agnostic. But religion is self-professed, and on that basis, I do have a question mark around whether religion should or shouldn't be a protected class. I don't have the answer.
I think it should be.
You think it should be?
And partly because it's long-standing from the foundation of the country, right? The idea of I don't know how far back it goes, but the idea that you could come here and be safe to believe what you believe and live. There is a challenge, though, because what's to say I think someone actually did this. They tried claiming that Trumpism was a religion and they believed Trump was the Messiah, and a judge told them no.
Well,
So
that's a
it
bit of
wa-
a cartoonish thing, but you first
right,
said you
right.
think it should be because that's the way it's been for a long time. That's an
Well,
argument
there's
just to continuing to do things because it's the way we've done them. I mean,
oh,
black
but let
people
me
used to be
but let me
slaves too.
finish.
Yeah,
Right. So the idea with religion is that we've created a society where we have numerous religions,
right.
and we've created an umbrella over all of them saying you can't do these things, but you can participate in public if you believe something. And so for the longest time, we've had Christians who believe, biblical Stone Age ideas and contradictory ideas. The same is true for Islam, Judaism, and many, many other religions. I'm just calling out Abraham specifically because it's
Right.
the easiest one to point to. Well, we need to live together. We can't go to Muslims and tell them you're not allowed to believe this anymore, but we can say the practice of doing X based on the Quran or the Bible is against the law. So we do restrict certain practices if it's a violation of the law.
Sure,
Based
yeah, but those
on
are called crimes,
separation
and
of
then
church.
it doesn't matter sort of why you're doing it. If something's a crime, it's a crime. I guess my question is, if you say I am part of the Pentecostal religion, that's a sort of self-professed choice, and to me, it's much closer to being someone who skateboards than it is to being someone who's Asian. So for me, religion as a sort of choice that people make is closer to other choices that people make, and it's not an immutable characteristic. So I think if there was a case to be made against protecting religion on that basis, it would be that it's just something people choose.
I don't entirely disagree. I think that's a really good point.
Mm.
I think my concern would be, would we remove the protection of religion and then all of a sudden, bakeries and whatever start saying no to people, and businesses start restricting access to tax-paying Americans? So, but let me do this. Let me explain to you my rationale for why the baker in Colorado should bake the cake. Right?
Okay.
We all pay taxes. If you want to argue we shouldn't, that's a different argument. Right now, we do. That means my money goes towards the roads, it goes towards the plumbing, it goes toward the collective defense. The building you have where you sell goods exists in a space I am contributing to. If you weren't there, someone else could be. It's not fair that I should lose access to a portion of my community because you don't like some immutable characteristic about me. Now, I think there's figuring out where the line is can be challenging. Behavior, most likely, if you go in and start shrieking at the top of your lungs, then maybe they should say you have to leave, you're disturbing people, or you're breaking the law. But if someone comes in wearing, like an imam comes into a bakery, they should not be able to be like, I'm arbitrarily removing a member of the public who contributes to my collective defense, to my fire services, to my plumbing. No, that's not fair. So we need social cohesion, and we might not like each other, but we have to respect and tolerate that we're all in this together.
That's a
So
bit of a different. I mean, in the only cap. So I basically agree with what you're saying. I mean, I don't think that's something that should happen. Religion as a protected class precludes the necessity of the argument you're making, though, doesn't it? Because there's no. It doesn't even matter whether we think that for social cohesion reasons it should or shouldn't be allowed, because religion's already a protected class.
yeah, what do you
I guess I thought
is
you
there
were going
more?
beyond that in a defense of why. How does this relate more specifically to the baker and the issue of sexual orientation?
It's a member of the public who's doing something that is legal and in no way impacts your business negatively. It's complicated, I'll admit. There's
Yeah.
things aren't necessarily black and white. There's nuance.
I mean, I
But
guess
the
the question about defining it that way is that there's nothing illegal about saying we don't serve people who wear MAGA hats. Political orientation is not a
in
politically
in
protected
in
politically
but
protected
in
class.
DC it is. In Washington DC it is,
Okay,
which is things
outside
that
of Washington D.C., it's not a protected class.
right.
Fashion, assuming that it is not inextricably linked to religion, which is a protected class, which would be like the MAGA hat, right? That would be a fashion statement. That's not a protected class. So by your definition, you also wouldn't be able to ask someone to leave because of their political affiliation, which is legal currently outside of Washington D.C. Is that something you would want to see changed?
Potentially, but it is
Really?
complicated. It is complicated. So I'll explain. If someone believes something awful and they're a taxpayer and they participate in public, I don't see what your argument is to remove someone arbitrarily from your business if they're not doing anything. Listen, I'll put it
Well,
this
the
way:
argument is private corporations are simply allowed by the law. You got to change the law if you don't want them to be able to do that.
they're they're allowed to kick anybody they want out.
Assuming they're
everything?
not violating, assuming they're not doing it on the basis of a protected class. Yeah, that's how it works.
Right.
Those signs that say we sort of reserve, we reserve the right to refuse service to anybody, that's
So
legally accurate, assuming it's not violating the protected class non-discrimination laws.
this is actually a really, really important thing to break down, because I think we get to the line drawing portion of
Yeah,
tribal arguments,
exactly.
because I think we both kind of we agree that people should be protected, but figuring out where and how far. I'm not entirely in favor of protecting political classes, like DC does.
Oh, you're not? Oh,
And
I thought you just said you were.
so the core concept of letting a law-abiding, calm, decent person, like your average person, go about their business, I like the idea, but it is there has to be a line drawn somewhere, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I agree.
And right, so for me, I think the line is, well, I agree. I think religion should be protected,
Hmm.
but political affiliation is where things start to get questionable to me
Okay.
outright. I'm not entirely against it. I'm interested in entertaining the concept. I maybe lean towards it, but it is challenging. And there's a lot of questions that I think need to be broken down to truly understand why or why not. And so ultimately, I'll put it this way: like, this conversation is part of the process of figuring out where to draw the line.
Yeah,
I,
yeah. So,
yeah,
I mean, I guess it's like right now it's not protected outside of DC.
right.
So, if we want to go in the direction of saying any potential, I don't even know the right word to, it's kind of difficult. I guess we're calling it a potential or actual customer or like patron of a business. One idea, which would be a significant move from where we are now, that you suggested is if the person's doing something legal, right? If they're just there trying to buy a cake, for example, or whatever the case may be, and it's a business that is open to the public. Obviously, there are exceptions of businesses that simply aren't open to the public, which are sort of handled differently. If the person's not breaking the law in some way, a business should not be allowed to turn them away. That would require some pretty significant and heavy-handed government intervention in private business, would it not?
Oh, probably, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
absolutely.
and is that philosophically, based on your self-described center-left politics, is that something you would be okay with?
I think the challenge is having the conversation and trying to figure out what to do is different from being like, I would like to assert the government do X. It's a challenge. Honestly, I don't have all the answers. What I do know is we face and I'm sorry if this is kind of like dodgy of the question, but you can re-ask me again. I'm just trying to get my thoughts out.
Yeah.
If we get to a point in society where we start restricting access to businesses, things start to break down. I think even in terms of like international endeavors and international conflict, we want to have as many links to each other as possible. The more trade we have with other countries, the less likely we are to engage in conflict. At least that's my general understanding of a lot of history. So it's a challenge, right? If we said no religion could, if we had no protected classes, you see this story. It was written about by Will Chamberlain. Lyndon Johnson would send 3 of his staffers to drive from DC to his home in Austin through the South, and they were all black. And when one day he said, "Will you take my dog with you?" And they explained to him that they drive for hours to try and find a bathroom because they won't be allowed to use these businesses. So that's when Lyndon Johnson was like, "Oh my God, this is a bad thing."
Yeah.
And I agree. And so the challenge is, how far do we go in trying to protect everybody? Can we go too far? And this is one of the debates, I think, with everything. It's particularly the Equality Act right now is why there's a lot of contention around that. Who is worthy of protection and who isn't? For me, I honestly don't know. My bigger issue, and again, I'll throw it back to you to re-ask anything you think I may have missed.
Yeah.
Is that social media platforms are monopolizing the commons in terms of commerce, financial transactions, and speech.
Okay, so
And
let's get to
yeah.
so I want to go to social media next, but just to make sure I understand your position on this piece, you said you don't like the idea of telling businesses that they have to accept certain customers, or you're not in favor of changing the law to make it so that businesses have to accept certain customers if they don't want to. Did I read that correctly?
Well, let me try and clarify. I think civil rights law as it is today is fantastic.
Okay.
There's probably some redundancies and some hiccups. I don't know all the laws. I think we need to have a conversation around civil rights protections as it pertains to local and federal jurisdiction. I don't know if political affiliation should be protected, particularly because there's a lot of crazy people out there who believe crazy things who probably we shouldn't allow in certain circumstances. But you brought up a good point about religion, because religions also believe crazy things. So I admit it's a big challenge. But I
But at the
don't think
business regulation standpoint, in terms of the government coming
I'm
in and
totally in
mandating,
favor of government coming and putting the boot down on all of these corporations that are destroying the environment, that are not paying a dime in taxes, that are putting their money overseas, that are generally disrupting things and then pitting us all against each other. Like, I'm not going to go on a rant, but
no,
yes,
but so
absolute regulation.
and let me just and we're going to move on to social media, but I want to
Yeah.
be super sure I understand this. Obviously, multinationals who don't pay taxes, that's more of a regulatory issue when it comes to finances. But imagine the customer walking into a clothing store, and the
Mm.
customer, for whatever reason that is not related to a protected class, the store doesn't want to do business with them. Should the government say to the store, you have to, unless this person's doing something illegal, you have to accept them as a customer, or should the
Well, that's
business be allowed to say, please leave, we don't want to serve you?
I think that's too absolute. There's too many factors. It's nuanced. I would say there's no yes or no answer to that question, right? Is the person screaming? Is it do we not
But that's
know?
the whole point. It's an act. They're not doing anything which is criminal, but they're also not being asked to leave on the basis of a protected class in which they are members. It's just the business doesn't want to do business with them. Should a private business have the right to say, we don't want to do business with you, or should the government force them to do business?
Now it depends on the scale, right? If it's small hole in the wall that sells hot dogs, and he says, you know what, no hot dog for you. Well, it's a small hot dog shop. If it's something like the electric company, then probably not because you don't have any choices. And so when a company gets too big, it dominates. And so it's a really nuanced question,
Well,
right?
yes and no. I
Businesses
mean,
of certain
monopoly
scales should be allowed to.
utilities, I would argue, are a bit different from what we're talking about here.
Well,
They're
let's say the what's a good way to put it? There's only one cable company, right?
mhm.
Should Comcast in the area where they own it refuse internet service to certain people for no reason? I would say no.
Most of those companies would have so I mean, I think that one is actually not really a very important question because most when Comcast comes in, typically, and I was involved in the negotiation of such a contract when I was on the board of a TV station. Typically, the contract that Comcast signs with the municipality says that they're not allowed to do that. So it actually would not really be an issue.
Sounds like the government regulating that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not. I am not a free market. I believe in a mixed economy. I think you need the government to come in and correct errors and stuff like that.
Okay.
So if we're notified of an error or something going wrong, I think the government. I think that's what the government should be doing, saying like kind of like a referee. This is
Fair.
what
I
you can't
agree.
be doing.
I agree there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about social media a little bit. So I did a long piece about social media and regulation as, town square, public square sort of situation because of the market share that some of these social media platforms have gained, and maybe it goes beyond just enforcing terms of service, or maybe it doesn't, and what's sort of best for the individual, what's best for society, all of this different stuff. To get us into that piece of it, Tim, my view fundamentally is that private companies have to be allowed to enforce terms of service, assuming that the enforcement of those terms of service is not discriminatory on the basis of the protected classes that you and I just spent 20 minutes talking about, and I guess mostly agree with. That's my starting
But they're
point.
exempt.
Okay,
They're exempt.
Give me an example.
Yes, they
You're
are.
talking about Washington,
Yes.
right?
No. I'm straight up. Twitter right now has the right to ban any protected class. Twitter can say, we're not going to allow any Asians on the platform. Boop, and they can't stop.
My reading of that so I know that there's court testimony that you tweeted, which I reviewed, and I reviewed the context of that and some legal opinions. That's not the opinion that I came away with. The opinion that I came away with is not, and let me see if I'll distinguish it the way I understand it, and then you tell me if I'm maybe misunderstanding it. My reading of the test, and this may be getting sort of too in the weeds for some in the audience, maybe not, but we'll give it a shot. My understanding of the testimony that you linked me to is that it is not that Twitter could say as a policy, we do not allow Asian people on our platform. I've seen no serious legal opinion that is something Twitter would be able to do. My understanding is that if there is a type of speech that Twitter identifies that would disproportionately wrap up Asian people, that is something Twitter is asserting would be legally acceptable.
In terms of that particular testimony,
Yeah.
but as we know from the motherboard piece, at least one employee said they use an algorithm to sweep up to target ISIS, which actually sweeps up innocent Muslims.
But that's
I
exactly
mean,
the point I'm making, which is that's not
for
them. Twitter is not saying as a policy we don't allow Muslims. They're saying we have a policy to target ISIS, which is mostly made up of Muslims, which will trigger some false positives.
So I guess the challenge then is, are we enforcing rules at a policy level or an individual level? If
Oh, I
someone is
agree. Oh, we completely. That's actually that's a key question. But I don't want anybody to think that what you're asserting, unless it is what you're asserting, is
Twi-
that. Yeah, go ahead.
so let's dig into it.
Yeah,
What is the Twitter public accommodation? That you can say something and it will appear in reverse chronological order to those who subscribe to it,
right.
right? That is the public accommodation. According to civil rights law, you cannot restrict a public accommodation based on protected characteristics. If someone quotes a verse from the Quran, Twitter can remove that.
Okay, you're saying at the individual level or through an algorithm that is meant to identify
Oh,
ISIS
they
members?
can no, like a Twitter employee has the First Amendment and Section 230 right to say anything pertaining to this protected class we can remove, because Twitter is a
But
speech
that's the
platform.
thing. So here's where I think, and I don't know if we're talking past each other or if we
Mm.
actually disagree about what the policy is, or if we're just misunderstanding what the policy is. What I'm saying is I have seen no evidence, nor any legal opinion, nor have I seen Twitter say that they believe they could have a policy that says we do not allow, for example, Jews on Twitter, and that would be legal.
So
They could,
let's
yeah,
so let's try and bring it to the real world.
okay.
The way you're describing it would be that McDonald's says, no, Jews are allowed in the store. We just refuse to sell them cheeseburgers. You see what I mean? The point of
Yeah, I'm
Twitter
not
is
sure that that's the
so
right
so
analogy.
so let's check it out. Twitter is a platform where you can express your thoughts.
Okay.
You can go on and you can. Otherwise, what are you really doing? Nothing. Like there's literally all Twitter does. Twitter has a First Amendment and Section 230 argument where they say whatever it is you say, we can remove it for any reason. And the judge asked, "Are you saying you could remove someone even if it would be discriminatory based on religion or gender?" And the response from Twitter's lawyers was yes.
Right. So I think you're misunderstanding that testimony. And there's a page that follows it or a sequence that follows it that I think is very illuminating. I'll just give an example,
Yeah.
and maybe the analogy may allow us to move forward on this. Imagine that Twitter wants to. I mean, let's just take the one from we were talking about earlier. Twitter wants to enforce a ban on anti-Semitic content. Okay, let's imagine that that's something Twitter decided they were going to do. Anti-Semitic content on Twitter is not equally balanced between men and women. We don't even have to argue about what the split is, but we would just agree it's very unlikely that it's 50-50 or 50.3 and 49.7, the way that men and women exist in society. Anti-Semitic content on Twitter is not evenly balanced between right-wingers and left-wingers. An ADL study says 71% is right-wing. Number doesn't matter. You might disagree with the number, but let's just imagine it's not evenly distributed. What Twitter is asserting is, if indeed 71% of anti-Semitic content comes from right-wingers, we are going to be disproportionately removing the content of and banning conservatives or right-wingers or whatever term you want to use. Twitter is not saying we would legally be able to say, no, imagine that they're white conservatives, just for our argument, because we got to add a protected class. Twitter's not saying if we wanted to ban all white conservatives from Twitter, we would be allowed to do it. That would violate a very specific non-discrimination law. What they are saying is that if the practice of removing anti-Semitic content disproportionately targets people who happen to be white, as long as we're not removing people for being white, that is legal. And I agree that that's legal.
That's a really interesting, that's a good point. That's a really good point. What we're seeing now, I think, with the digital space is that we've actually got a distinction between people as thoughts and the thoughts related to certain characteristics and identities and the individual themselves and their identity. Because I think by your explanation, and again, I think it's a good point, Twitter couldn't actually ban someone for being gay because they're banning the speech specifically, right?
No,
like if someone, so I'll put it this way.
Yeah.
If someone was gay and made a post talking about the things they do as a gay person, Twitter could ban them, right?
Well, I mean, I guess if they had a policy that said that you can't talk about gay things, I don't know.
No, I'm saying like from a legal standpoint, based on the First Amendment argument that Twitter's under no obligation to support the speech of anyone else, right?
I
So
guess so. Okay.
if you're saying so let's Twitter does have a policy that bans hate speech, which means because like you said, it's predominantly coming from one side, they predominantly get banned.
Yeah.
And we're speaking hypothetically because I don't know the numbers, but for the sake, it's again, I think it's a good point. It's something I hadn't realized. There is going to be a distinction between the individual's identity and the ideas. The ideas don't have an identity.
Right. So are you agreeing that you asserting that Twitter claims they can ban people on the basis of protected classes was not an accurate reading?
I think you're correct, but I do want to clarify. I think what we're actually seeing is that there are certain ideas associated with identity politics.
Yes.
And that Twitter has the ability to remove ideas around certain groups that are specific to that group. For instance,
I agree.
Right. So this is a really great distinction. This is fantastic. Twitter's not going to say, hey, you're Muslim, you're gone. Like, let's say a Muslim guy says, I'd like to order pizza. And they say, ha, you're Muslim, you're banned. What they're actually saying is the ideas associated with the Quran, that verse in particular, we're going to remove.
Okay. Right. And it will disproportionately impact people who are Muslim.
Right.
Yeah. I think there's another important distinction here, which is whether this is being done algorithmically and people are being caught up in false positives versus whether Twitter is saying as a policy, we are going to proactively remove Quran verses that relate to pizza or whatever example you had. I mean, I think that's an issue because when you go back to Twitter said, we have to be careful about algorithmically removing white nationalist content because, like you said, a lot of Trumpists use similar language, and we're going to end up removing Trumpists who, I mean, I guess aren't white supremacists. I guess maybe if they're using the language, maybe they are. I don't know. They expressed a concern about that. That is an algorithmic false positive.
So I think the argument made by the Twitter employee was that a lot of white nationalists will use like the Pepe meme as well, and they'll do like the OK hand sign. Mm-hmm. But a lot of Trump supporters will use similar, like, I think MAGA is the easiest way to put it. You absolutely are going to have white nationalists saying MAGA. Sure. And then if the algorithm detects that overwhelmingly people who talk about these issues also have this hashtag, it will start grabbing innocent people, right?
That would be interesting. I think the more relevant example is the opposite, though, because so many people use MAGA that it's very hard to imagine that Twitter would execute a policy of banning anyone who says MAGA and it'll accidentally wrap up some white nationalists. I think a better example, Tim, and tell me if you disagree, would be that there would be some kind of phraseology that it's mostly white nationalists using, which some Trumpists that are not white nationalists might use. And it's the Trumpists who would accidentally get banned, because what you're describing would be a policy that would actually be targeting Trumpists that would accidentally impact white nationalists. Twitter's saying it would be the opposite.
Oh, I see. Well, it was I think it was it James Woods maybe, who posted the Christchurch Pepe Clown World thing.
I'm not sure. I don't follow him.
James Woods found himself using, yes, an overt white nationalist meme, and I don't think he knew what it was. So, I think that probably is a good example. They would have been like, get him out of there. But it's, some of these things, I don't know. You have an argument on the left of whether or not the OK hand sign is actually like a white supremacist hand sign.
Right, but that's not the relevant argument when it comes to the legality of what Twitter is asserting it can do, which I think is the more important thing. I mean, yeah, the left can debate, the right can the right can debate whether referring to money as shekels is implicitly anti-Semitic or not. The left can debate whether the hand sign is or is not. But the more important thing to me is I want to make sure that we're not putting out false information about what Twitter is asserting they could legally do.
No, I think you did a good job when we kind of clarified that. I think, a lot of these debates come down to perspective, right? I'm looking at a 6, you're looking at a 9, but I will say, I think it's fair to say what we've kind of concluded is that Twitter isn't banning someone for being a thing. They're banning for ideas pertaining to a thing, right?
That's based on the testimony you sent me that I read. That's my interpretation.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
So I guess my concern is, should we protect the ideas pertaining to being trans, for instance?
Like that was going to be my next question, which is, okay, given that we've established, we had sort of like part pre-A of the conversation was what are Tim Pool's politics? But once we got past that, we got into what is our sense of protected classes and non-discrimination law? Then we got into what is it that we believe Twitter can currently legally do, and what does Twitter seem to believe they can currently do? The next question is, does there need to be policy change, and what should that policy change be? And doesn't it get into the very overt government intrusion into private businesses? I don't know the answer. I guess we have to start thinking about it.
I'm not opposed to the government stepping in when changes need to be made.
And but what would we want the government to do?
So this is a serious challenge that has a lot of questions that have to be answered. I don't know all the answers. What I do know is you have a large group of people in the mainstream who believe certain things, and a large group of people in the mainstream who believe the opposite. Misgendering is the best example. Now, there's a lot of people who think, they try and mischaracterize my argument that I'm trying to argue in favor of people being transphobic. No, absolutely not.
Yeah,
I don't like
to be
hate
clear to
speech.
my audience, let's give Tim the full good faith benefit, whether you believe he's earned it or not. And I'm not implying he has or hasn't, but because this is his first appearance on my channel, let's assume that his argument is only what he claims it is and not read more into it. Okay.
Ben Shapiro has one of the top podcasts in the world.
Okay.
He has a massive following, and his views are considered to be mainstream. I disagree with the good majority of his views, but I recognize that in order to bring about sound policy in the direction I want, we have to champion over those ideas through politics, through debate. Well, Ben Shapiro believes that misgendering isn't a thing, that if someone is born biologically male, they're a he, and if someone is born biologically female, they're a she, etc. Twitter has a rule specifically that you can't do that. That you have to use the pronoun someone requested. So the most notable instance would be Meghan Murphy. And I'm not going to get into, for those that aren't familiar, she did have some tweets which talked about people specifically, but she had one tweet that was in response to an argument about the 1950s where she said, "Men aren't women, though." And she was suspended from Twitter for that.
Okay.
Whether you agree or disagree, I think it's important to recognize the left believes respect the pronoun, and the right says don't respect the personal pronouns. If Twitter has a policy in place that restricts what you can or can't say, it disproportionately affects conservatives who are engaging in a mainstream perspective.
Right. So I guess what I would say is what we've discussed so far in our conversation seems to be, number one, we agree, and it's not whether I see a 6 and you see a 9. We agree that political orientation is not a protected class. That part we agree with.
But this gets us into a bigger question.
Well, we'll get to the bigger question, but let's handle it at the micro first.
So I would say no to that.
It's not a protected class. Good.
No.
Oh, you're saying it is a protected class?
It is. Yeah, in DC it is, which means.
Well, okay, but most people don't live in DC, right?
But it doesn't matter. Should a national company have to abide by local jurisdictions for those jurisdictions?
I think it would be an impossible standard for a company that is a multinational company to be expected to abide. I mean, as a practical matter, it seems impossible to enforce or expect something like that to be enforced.
They already do it. Twitter already enforces per jurisdiction
on the basis of IP address.
I believe the answer is yes. I don't know how they enforce the laws of other countries, but they do.
And what if you signed up for Twitter in DC but are tweeting from Arizona? Which law gets enforced?
Probably Arizona, I'd imagine.
And is that based on what's that based on?
This is one of the biggest civic challenges I think we're facing is these companies are in a digital world, so it's hard to know at what level we can actually enforce these things. I honestly, it's challenging.
But I guess so. The question then becomes one of regulation, right? If Twitter's terms of service are, I mean, okay, let's take it, let's build it back. So we started at the top with an example and we're going down. Let's just for a second, as a thought experiment, reverse it and build it from the bottom up. Can businesses exist that have perspectives on how transgender people are treated within their businesses? Is that acceptable legally?
I actually don't necessarily. I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. I mean, I'm not asking rhetorically. I think the answer is yes.
I'm sorry. The answer is actually no in many jurisdictions. The answer is actually no.
What do you mean?
There's been the new human rights laws that are emerging around like in New York, Philly, New Jersey, and now with the Equality Act. I don't know specifically about the Equality Act, but I do know that at least in New York, you cannot take self-expression into account for how you have your business. So what ends up happening is any new build can't have a men's or women's room. They can't create special circumstances for people based on their identity, and literally identity as a whole. It could be anything. You could be a furry. You could be whatever. So they're making neutral bathrooms, just single rooms with no markings on them for everybody.
But let's see if we can maybe boil it down to a specific example. David Pakman in Boston, Massachusetts. I have a company. I've got 100 employees, and I've got an employee handbook, and my employee handbook says, Here is the policy for time off. Here's how you request vacation. Here is how tardiness and absenteeism will be handled. And as a matter of policy, we refer to people with the gender pronouns that they request. Would there be anything legally problematic about that?
I think the answer is no, because it actually falls under civil rights protection. But again, I'm not a lawyer. I think
But the
business
point is,
actually
I would be able
obligated.
to establish my business as long as I'm not violating anyone's, as long as I'm not, violating protected
it's
classes, I would be allowed to
but
do that.
actually, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I'd argue under a First Amendment argument is the answer is no. You can't make someone speak.
Oh, I'm not making anyone speak. I'm just saying that as a matter of company policy, we refer to people on the basis of the pronoun that is associated with their gender identity. That I'm not forcing anyone to say anything. You can sit there at your computer and write emails and not talk to anybody. It's just a company policy, right? I'm just saying that's the
If
policy
you
of the company.
if you don't enforce it, I mean, it's actually a tough question. I'm not a lawyer. I wouldn't be able to answer.
I mean,
Because
I
think
guess what we're building to, though, is at a certain point, if it's not violating someone's status as a member of a protected class by intent, as we already talked about, intent and impact are sort of two different things. I don't know legally how we tell Twitter they can't have a policy on how people should be gendered.
I think it's an issue of developing the civic and figuring out where we draw the line. And I think you disagree that Twitter should, and I think the line is probably in a different place.
I'm not even
sure
sure, honestly. Like, I'm not. I totally get your point, which is, what about accidental misgendering, right? Like, I mean, I think that creates more, even more. I think the gendering on Twitter thing is an edge case, and I resist sometimes the instinct to get drawn into edge cases as representative of the whole. But even within this edge case, what about accidental misgenderings? I mean, I don't know.
People have been banned for that.
Yeah,
there was
that may be.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, there was a post that went viral where someone responded to, it was a cartoon avatar, because just like people do that, and they said, "Dude, comma, listen, X, Y, and Z, A, B, and C," and they got suspended for misgendering for saying "dude," and "dude" wasn't even meant to be gendered. It was meant to be like a gender neutral, like exclamatory.
Yeah.
Actually, one really fascinating thing we're seeing with the backfiring of a lot of these laws is there are now certain like anti-SJW types that have asserted pronouns in their profiles to get people banned who refuse to use it. So it's weaponizing it.
Yeah, I don't know about that. And again, I feel like once we get into the way people misuse policy or take advantage of edge cases, I don't know that that's how I would be making policy necessarily. I think we kind of got to what, for me, the crux of this stuff is about the legality of it and about, at a certain point, do we want social media platforms regulated as if they were government entities? Because that's eventually kind of the key question, right, Tim? Like, do we consider these to be public square entities that should be governed in a different way?
We do have some rulings already. There's two. There was one specifically about Trump. You can't block people because you've created a public forum.
Right.
And so he still has some people blocked, to my understanding. The other was, I believe it was called like Peckingham versus North Carolina, where the Supreme Court recently unanimously ruled that the government cannot constrain access to online services because it's where people get their information, do commerce, find jobs, and to do so would be a restriction of individual liberty. You'd have to read the exact ruling, but they essentially said social media is the new digital square, and because of that, no law can be passed in this country that would take someone's right to this platform away. So we're getting there.
Yeah, and now remember, Tim, there is one thing, there is a caveat there, which is passing a law that takes away someone's access to the platform is sort of one standard. That would not preclude the removal of specific pieces of content, even if they disproportionately affect particular groups of people. Like, do we agree that these are different standards?
Well, I brought this ruling up specifically not to say that they're going to do something, but that the Supreme Court's personal view is that social media is a public square. So there's no restrictions or on platforms what they can or can't do yet, but the opinion of the Supreme Court is that it is the digital public square. So I think we're really close to getting regulation. Texas, California, and Florida have already proposed them. Florida's failed. Texas is based on if a platform says they're neutral, but they're not, then they have to, there's a remedy for that. I don't know. I think it's the AG sues them. And then with California, it's a shocking law. It just says straight up any social media site based in California can't restrict someone for political affiliation or the political content of what they post.
Well, I mean, that would be exactly what we're talking about. That would be sort of government saying, even though this is not a protected class according to the Civil Rights Act or the non-discrimination, any of that, these are additional government provisions, which I think if someone is a small government conservative, so to speak, they should probably be opposed to it, right?
And most of them are actually.
Oh, they are.
And
Okay,
so,
yeah. I don't talk to enough of them to know.
so they are, but a lot of them are for regulation because I think, for the most part, one thing that, it's a big group of people with varying ideologies. Some of them are kind of centrist, center right, and so they're going to be for regulation or whatever. And a lot of them are going to be laissez-faire, never. And I am not laissez-faire. So for me, I think we face a big challenge. Donald Trump is only on Twitter. When he tweets something, it affects the world.
Mm-hmm.
For a private company to say, you don't get to stand in front of this man or respond to him terrifies me, right? Because think about this. Someone could tweet to Donald Trump, you're an effing blah, 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 blah. And Twitter can be like, removed. I don't like the idea of a private company telling me I'm not allowed to yell at the president. But the issue here is the scale. If Trump were going to a different venue and I got kicked out of one, I'd be like, well, I'll go to the next one and tell him he's the C word. But if there's only one place where he's at, and the private company is using their authority to basically dictate what you can or can't, that terrifies me.
Sure. I mean, I think that the counter side of it is not that I'm steel manning, and the anti-regulation crowd, but there is a sort of perspective that businesses should not be regulated by the government. They shall not be regulated by the government beyond what is deemed absolutely necessary. And then it just becomes a debate over whether what you're suggesting is absolutely necessary. And then that's a mess. And I don't know where we
opinion. Just like, but here's the thing, right? Let's forget the conservatives.
Yep.
Are you familiar with Mavic Media?
No.
So Mavic is always going to get a shout out from me. They're anti-war leftist, pro-Bernie, anti-intervention, but they receive I think their company is half owned by Ruptly, which is Russia Today.
Sure.
So they got suspended by Facebook, and they didn't break any rules, and they were suspended for I think like a week and a half, and it was because CNN reached out to Facebook, said, "Hey, did you see these guys are funded by Russia?" Waited until Facebook took them down. And then CNN publishes this story. Gotcha. We found the Russian media.
Right.
Another example is Twitter removed 2,000 pro-Maduro accounts. I'm not saying you should be for or against Maduro, but when these things fly under the radar, I think because the left isn't as tuned in, the right is tuned in heavily. It's like Donald Trump's tweeting
I don't know
right?
that I would like to see evidence for the assertion about who's tuned in, because I think that, making any kind of broad claim like that, I would want to be super clear on where that's coming from. Sometimes people pay attention to something and they don't comment. So, I think there's different ways to measure that. But I think the question, though, is, were the accounts removed because they were pro-Maduro? If so, I mean, again, I don't even think there's anything illegal about that. We can argue it should be illegal, right? Which is what you and I are talking about.
Exactly.
It's not currently illegal. But I would be curious what the content of the messages were, because it's possible. I just don't know enough about that particular incident.
Twitter referred to it, I believe, and again, I Google it. They said something like it was interference or governmental interference or something, and I believe they were quoted as saying, though they didn't have direct evidence, something like that. I don't know the full details. I just know that what I end up seeing is the anti-war left, people who essentially oppose the machine in various capacities, are excised. Excuse me. And, it's going to happen that CNN's already laying the stones against Bernie. You know what I mean? They had all those people at the CNN who are working for these lobbying groups. Yeah. I don't like the idea of the massive machine restricting access to the new public square. It may be that I'm in front of the market. I'm a very technological individual. I was in the hacker community. So I think maybe the things I'm seeing are more alarming to me because I'm like watching them develop, but it maybe hit the mainstream. But rest assured, they're going to ban everybody arbitrarily if they have the power to ban everybody arbitrarily. And that includes somebody who wants to call Donald Trump the C word,
That may be. I'm curious. I mean, the type of regulation you're describing that would apply to Twitter or Facebook, for example, should it be also applied equally to the content on websites like Reddit and 4chan?
So, well, they're different sites, and this is the
I know that they're different sites. Yeah.
I just mean to say, like, the structure of the algorithm and how they function is different.
Yes.
And there's a serious challenge, because I'll say this too. I believe that if right now the US government said, Supreme Court unanimous, Twitter can no longer remove people for hate speech or whatever, Twitter
Yeah.
would probably like just fall apart.
Okay.
It's gonna get overrun by the nastiest insanity. You can't do anything about it. But
It's
I think
possible they might also roll out, better moderation tools where people can control what it is that they're seeing. I mean, I think they would manage. I don't think it would be the end of Twitter.
no, I mean, like, if they weren't allowed to moderate based on legal speech, it
Right,
would be
right.
really
No,
bad.
the idea would be there might be abandonment because it becomes such a horrible experience for a lot of
Right.
users. But I think they'd roll out
Exactly.
moderation tools that users can use for themselves.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, then maybe I mean, isn't that a good thing?
Oh, those tools are good no matter what. I have thousands of
Yeah.
people muted. But my question is, I know that Reddit and
Me too.
4chan, I know Reddit and 4chan are different websites, but what I'm saying is, would you apply the same type of government intervention regulation to them?
It depends on what the government regulation is, because it might have to do with certain technological aspects. So, and again, let me try and clarify. Twitter is a reverse chronological system with a default algorithmic system. Algorithmic versus reverse chronological is going to have entirely different laws. So, Twitter's algorithm chooses who to put in front of you. All right. So that you can't regulate who they're promoting. Reverse chronological, you can say it's got to be this way.
Sort
it's-
of. I mean, don't you have? I'm trying to remember. I'm spending less and less time on Twitter, but on my Twitter app, I have the option of seeing the sort of what's called like the curated feed. But I can press a button telling it that I don't want it to make judgments, like show me low quality tweets, show me everything sort of thing. Maybe that's not 100%, but it seems like there's elements of both on Twitter.
No, you're right. You can easily switch between the two.
Right.
So the issue would be, like, I think YouTube's an easier example. When you go to youtube.com, it shows you 15 videos. You might have 1,000 subscriptions.
Sure.
So YouTube has to choose who you're going to see. That's promotion. I don't think YouTube's under any obligation to promote your content.
Okay.
In terms of your subscription tab, however, it should notify you that the person you're following has a new video, and you can choose to click it and go to their channel.
Fair.
So algorithmic versus reverse chronological are very different. If I say I follow you and I want to see your tweet when it happens, and that's how the system works,
Right.
and we put a regulation in place, it would be specific to that feed, which is part of the challenge.
Yeah, but again, so I mean, on Reddit, you can hit the new feed, which will show you reverse chronological, or you can hit the hot feed, which is a sort of popularity-based algorithm. So again, it seems like the difference you're pointing out that is making you fall short of saying Reddit and 4chan should be regulated the same way is not really that much of a difference. So, I mean, if you don't think Reddit and 4chan should be regulated the same way, that's a totally legitimate position to take. I would just want to know that.
I think in terms of so Reddit isn't an algorithm. What gets upvoted is based on what the community chooses to push forward.
Yes, although there
that's
are always questions as to whether that is a complete representation of what the community is voting for or whether Reddit is influencing it. But in theory, that's what it is. Okay.
I mean, yeah, if people don't vote, what do you do? Like, we want to encourage them to vote. If they don't, that's what they get. In fact, I believe it's called the 1% rule, that 1% of users on Reddit are the ones making the content go to the top.
Sure.
99% just absorb it.
I mean, I think
So-
that's the same on Twitter, though, because most people don't like, reply, or retweet tweets that they read, right?
It's true. No, you're right. You're right.
Fair.
I got to be honest, though, man. I really, I can see these problems. I don't think I know how to solve them, but I do feel
No. I'm just wondering, like, if there's something that you think is uniquely different where you don't want 4chan and Reddit subjected to whatever regulation you do favor for Twitter.
So regulation will have to be specific based on technology, but they should all be under the same constraints.
Right. Okay. Very fair.
I don't no special privileges for anybody, but again, acknowledging 4chan isn't an algorithmic system. It's just based on when you comment, it moves to the top. So the difference I'm trying to make, I guess, is that YouTube chooses the winners and losers, and so does Facebook. You can't regulate that. Facebook is under no obligation to promote me to anyone.
Right.
If I have a page, you can go to it if you want to. Right. So it's different. It's tough. I don't know. Unless someone chooses reverse chronological feed, I don't know.
Fair enough. Okay, well, listen, I mean, I don't do these like 4-hour streams where we continue beating a dead horse. What I like to do is, this is a really good initial conversation. I think my audience and I now have a better sense of sort of where you stand, and I want to think more about these issues. But I think that this has been very, very interesting, and one of the, I mean, political differences aside, because we have them, I hate doing this stuff where I pretend like it's all about the marketplace of ideas, and every idea deserves the exact same amount of time. I'm not for any of that bullshit, as
I
you
agree.
know, but I do think that if we can have actual productive conversations about important issues, even if we have political disagreements, that's still a good thing. And hopefully the audience agrees with that.
Oh hell yeah, this is what we need to be doing, man. And I want to point out that when the point you made about it's the idea, not the identity, is extremely important, particularly for me, and I think for the conversation, because I think that is being lost, right? The idea that Twitter, we need to separate the ideas from the identity, right?
I think we do. I think we
Yeah, that's
absolutely do.
that's fascinating. Actually, I'm gonna think on that one.
So if everybody who's watching on my channel, stick around because there's a million super chats that I want to get to. I may even open up the phone lines and all of this stuff. But Tim, we should do this again, maybe on a different topic, maybe on this topic, maybe we bring in somebody else. I mean, who knows? But I think that this has been extraordinarily useful. If not the most, we haven't solved these problems, but at least we've like identified where we see the problems existing.
Let me just give you like my final take on, this is one small piece of a bigger argument that I'm concerned about. It's Amazon is taking over commerce, PayPal is taking over transactions,
right?
Twitter, Facebook, Google are taking over. Like, news media in this country is dying, partly because Google and Facebook have monopolized advertising revenue, so they're being strangled. We got to do something about these monopolies, whatever form that takes. Like, I'm game to have that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, antitrust is once again becoming a major issue. I know Elizabeth Warren's been talking about it, Bernie a little bit, but you're not hearing that much. And part of it is because Democrats and Republicans both are funded by a lot of these same companies that have a vested interest in suppressing competition. That's the bottom line, right?
I like seeing the Republicans call it the Koch brothers now for two reasons. Their open borders policy and their refusing to get behind free speech. It makes you wonder, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And we've been following that. All right, Tim, I'm going to let you go on Skype, but let's touch base after. I'll let you get to your stream. I'm going to talk to some of my viewers, and I really appreciate you being on with me today.
No, I appreciate you too, man. Appreciate it. I always recommend you because I think you do a good job.
Thank you. All right. Take care, Tim. We'll talk soon.
Adios.
All right. So we'll close out there. I'm also on Tim's channel, which I'm going to close out. Okay, there we go. And let me get this other computer shut down because we've got, I mean, it's just like computers on computers on computers here to make this all happen. Okay, if people, first and foremost, there have been people signing up for memberships just like crazy while this was all going on. So I'm glad that people have appreciated what we've been doing. And let me say thanks to some of these people. If you are interested in me opening the phone lines like right now and hearing from you about how you think this all went, if we get 10 new members, I'll open up the phone lines, okay? Memberships are really easy to get. Takes 1 minute on my website. It's the primary funding source for what I do. All of these extra streams and stuff we've been doing are directly funded by memberships. Just pick up a membership, davidpakman.com/membership. The normal prices are really, really affordable. Even better, the coupon code THISIS2020 will save you 40% off of any membership. And even more importantly, if you want a membership for $25 for the entire year, it's $2 a month. Okay, it's $2 a month. If you want a membership for just $25, select the $60 yearly membership, apply the coupon code SAVE35. That membership will drop to just $25 for the entire year. I'll say your name and thank you for signing up. And it's really, I mean, it's, you, by the way, this, I actually wasn't even going to get into this, but there is a situation going on with YouTube ad revenue that's affecting me, Sam Cedar, the Young Turks, Kyle Kolinsky. I don't know if they've been talking about it, but it's an issue that YouTube's got to get fixed, which maybe I'll talk about on the show tomorrow. But in any case, membership is how we're funded, pays for staff salaries, pays for the equipment, the studio, all of this stuff. And I will gladly take some phone calls if 10 people sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. There are so many super chats. I'm going to just try to take an overview of what's been said because there is just so much here. Questions about trade wars. Somebody sent 500 Swedish kroner asking me to touch my hair. There you go. Very, very soft and pliable, completely pliable. In case anybody's worried about that. Nabil Kavari says Tim got busted and that edgy Dave Rubin is a way to describe him. Pack God can fall asleep and still expose this hack. That's not very nice. Beanie is cheaper than toupee. Very efficient. Geez, that is aggressive. Shout out to Sean Ranklin. Tim, when will you debate Destiny? Tim Pool's not used to being called out. Holy shit. I wish I was just focusing on the conversation. I had no idea that this much Tim Pool hate was going here. Keep up the great work. Big fan of both David and Tim. Hope you can find common ground. Do more drawing on Instagram. Tim, you need help keeping your thoughts together. Well, Tim's gone. Affirmative action only helps white people. Tim Pool lied about no-go zones. I don't know anything about that. Tim and his lackeys are crybabies. If you guys made love, who would be on top? Do you think the current problem of tech-based monopolies is similar to the rail monopolies? Could this current problem be solved in the same way as his cabinet took care of the railroad monopolies of the infant 20th century? His cabinet, whose cabinet? I'm not sure I fully understand that. What about porn or spam comments on Twitter if it was government regulated? I mean, that's an open question. I don't know. That's why I'm so sort of not skeptical, because I'm not skeptical. I think it is necessary to some degree, but that's why I'm so careful, I think I would say, about exactly how these regulations would work and what the unintended consequences would be, because I do think that it opens pretty dangerous territory. The memes of destruction says we need less yelling and more conversations like this. Thank you. I appreciate that, and I hope that it was enjoyable to people. Okay, let me say thanks to a few people. TJ Russell Jr. has signed up and is a new member. That's new member number 1 of the evening. Michael Woods has signed up using the coupon code This Is 2020. That's new member number 2 of the evening. And Michael McPherson has signed up, and that is new member number 3 of the evening. So if people want me to open up the phone lines at 617-830-4750, 7 more members, and I'll do that. As I've said before, membership is really cheap, really, really cheap. I know that for a lot of people in our audience, because they let me know, money is tight, and that's okay. I still am doing the show for you, for everybody. It doesn't matter. But for the people in the audience who can afford even just $2 a month, and that is most of the people in the audience, that actually makes us totally independent of needing huge corporate advertisers. It makes us independent of all sorts of other fluctuations. And that's why I talk about membership and why it's so important. A new feature, by the way, funded by membership, is that we have, effective yesterday, we have started properly captioning, subtitling all of our YouTube videos, not the live streams, but all of our daily clips for people who are both hard of hearing or just like to read along with the show. That's something that's funded directly by membership fees. We also did a technical upgrade to the program where not the live streams, but the uploaded clips are in higher resolution and better audio quality, which I know people who are watching on anything bigger than like a 20-inch monitor are already appreciating. So a lot of continued exciting developments, all funded by membership. Rapid is a new YouTube channel member. That's new member number 4 of the evening, and Vegas Bushido is new member number 5 of the evening. So we're halfway there in pretty short order. And again, I don't have unlimited time tonight, but if people want me to take some phone calls, I will gladly do it if we get 5 more members. Let me see. So I want to look at a couple places. I had no idea people were reacting so aggressively to Tim. Let me first look at the regular chat just to see what things are looking like in terms of people. Tim's continuing to think and talk about the conversation on his stream while David is pitching memberships. Well, go over to Tim Pool's stream then. No problem whatsoever. Is the TV behind me sideways? Yes, it is. Someone attacked your website, David Pacman. Is that true? Let me take a look at that. I hope that's not true. I'm going to look at it on my phone. Someone attacked my website. Wouldn't be the first time that that's happened. Yeah, it does seem, is the website down? It does appear to be down. That is interesting. I wonder what's going on. Might be some kind of DDoS attack again or something like that. Uh, People are calling Tim's a fascist. Tim had twice as many viewers as David. Yeah, I rarely stream, and I think he's been promoting it a lot longer. It is interesting that the website does seem to be down, which is going to make it difficult for people to sign up. And if that's the case, I may need to just go and deal with that. People saying that it's not loading. Very, very strange. Yeah. All right, I'm going to have to go deal with that because if it is a DDoS attack, I've got to go and get our web person on right away. So, a lovely way to wrap up a very respectful conversation with Tim Pool. That does it for the stream. I will probably do a stream tomorrow and we'll have more time to do all sorts of different stuff.